I'm Dick Rowland, and I'm the president of the Grassroot Institute of Hawaii. We do this every year, and one of our main sponsors is a national organization, the Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice. Milton Friedman's political approach was, it kind of matches our group. And that is that he kind of looked at politics, first of all, as he was nonpartisan, and he didn't care whether it was Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or whatever. He was more interested in individual, personal freedom and the development of individual personal freedom, and was totally against statism, that is, the growth of the state. So, to Milton, the whole subject was up or down. And we look at it the same way. And you're either moving up towards individual human freedom or moving down towards statism. And totally nonpartisan as we look at things. So there are times that we're agreeing with the Democrats, times we're agreeing with the Republicans, and times, I guess, when we're disagreeing with both. Without further ado, let me ask our friend Sammy Slom, the Lone Ranger of the Hawaii Senate, to come up and take over as MC.
Aloha! Aloha! This is a joyous occasion. This is our 6th annual Milton Friedman Luncheon. Can I see by a show of hands, how many of you are here for the first time? The first time. Wow! Well, thank you and welcome. We have so many good people within our community, so many people that contribute so much. And one of those people happens to be Professor Ken Schoolland of Hawaii Pacific University. And Ken is really a local treasure who is known locally, nationally, and internationally. In fact, he's spending more and more of his time abroad. But he is known not only for his teaching, but primarily for his work and studies in liberty and the personal freedom philosophy, and is the author of the best-selling book translated into 42 languages? 44 languages around the world, The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible. But he has developed some really good materials and has really motivated a lot of young people in our community and elsewhere on the philosophy of freedom and philosophy of liberty. So, Ken Schoolland, tell us about the philosophy of liberty.
Well, I have to say that this is the greatest honor for me to be giving tribute to the man who has had a greater impact on my life than anyone else outside of my own personal family. Milton Friedman was a guy that gave me whole direction in my own personal life, and I've since introduced him to at least 8,000 students of my own over the years, each and every one of them, about the importance of Milton Friedman and his ideas. I first learned of it when I was sitting in my very first economics class, and I was being told that the government was the answer to every problem. And then, lo and behold, there was this other little book that almost everybody else shunned in favor of Paul Samuelson's book on economics. Here was this Capitalism and Freedom. And I started looking into it, and Milton Friedman was opening my eyes in a lot of ways. One of the first things that I noticed in there was his objection to licensing of professions, saying that it stands in the way of consumer choice and serves for guilds essentially to shield themselves from competition, thus depriving consumers of better prices, services, innovation. And, well, I thought, wow, this is an interesting outlook. Then in the class we saw this debate between Milton Friedman and Paul Samuelson. Samuelson was saying, well, okay, monetary policy is okay, but fiscal policy is more important. And Friedman just bluntly answered back in a very humorous way, well, there is no such thing as fiscal policy. I mean, because everything the government spends has to first be taken from something else, somebody else who's probably doing something better with it than what the government is going to be doing. The Tonsstoff argument, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Well, he made his mark essentially by advocating less government, lower taxes, the flat tax, which was taken up broadly in Estonia and Chile and other countries, and to great success, some of the most astounding success in economic performance. He wrote a book with Anna Schwartz called Monetary History of the United States, in which he analyzed the role of the Federal Reserve Board in contributing greatly to the Great Depression, what he labeled the Great Contraction, because by contracting the money supply by a third, he says that a mild recession had been turned into a great, deep, and long depression. It was bad behavior by the Fed that had led us into these problems. And I think if he looked around today at what the Fed is doing, he would say, he would be turning in his grave at the kinds of things the Fed is doing today as well. I remember reading an article in the Newsweek magazine about how he talked about how when the Fed increases money supply in 1 year, it's about 2 years later that you can expect big inflation. Well, we'll see. We'll test that. See, it's going to be very, very shortly, and we'll see if the inflation will come home to roost. My bet is with him. He was soundly against inflation. It was a way of robbing people, especially low-income people, of the value of their wealth and their income. And he advocated instead a fixed rule, a mechanical process whereby just a modest increase in the money supply through the Fed. He advocated against the fixed exchange rate of the Bretton Woods system. That collapsed, and his system of the floating exchange rates became realized in August of 1971 when President Nixon closed the gold window. He thought that Nixon was one of the smartest of the presidents, but had the lowest character. On the other hand, he had the feeling that while Ronald Reagan was smart enough, he was one of very high character, one of great principles that he adhered to very much. He was an unparalleled, unrivaled champion of free trade. As you know from his Free to Choose series that was published, that was first produced on by Bob Chittister and broadcast on PBS, and has since been used in all of my classes and many classes around the country. He advocated very strongly the virtues of free trade, open trade. He gave Hong Kong as a great example. And interestingly, India and China have followed very much that example, and it's led to the tremendous improvement in the life of trade by bringing people, 300 million people out of poverty in those countries, maybe hundreds more. He often started with his illustration of iPencil, the extraordinary complexity of the international trading system that made it possible to simply make a simple product like that from the works of thousands of people around the world, many of which you didn't know and many of which you'd never meet, but it was all essential to bring us the kind of standard of living that we enjoyed. He was never one to shirk controversy. He always just ran right into it, you know, but he always did it with a smile on his face and a great sense of humor and a great intellect. He took on the issue, for example, of education vouchers, saying that choice and competition are the ways that the consumers of education, the parents and the students, could take control of their education and actually choose the best. He believed that it was the greatest virtue for the poor, especially the poor, who needed to get out of the poverty, and the choice in education would allow them the opportunity to use these vouchers to seek the best schools, the best education for themselves. This has been adopted in some states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Florida. It's been adopted by some countries, Chile and Sweden, with great success at improving educational performance at half the cost. He also advocated the privatization of pension schemes, such as the Social Security program, such has been adopted in Chile and Singapore to great success. He was one who advocated the all-volunteer military at a time during the Vietnam War when the draft was pervasive and was normal in the country. And I remember one debate that he had with General William Westmoreland. William Westmoreland had said that he didn't want to be head of an army of mercenaries. And Friedman reminded him that by that definition, the general was a mercenary, and that because he expected to be paid and became professional, he should offer the same for his his soldiers. He was also one who took on the challenge, along with William F. Buckley and former Secretary of State George Shultz, in advocating an end to prohibition of marijuana, arguing that prohibition did more harm than good. And he was one that introduced an idea of the negative income tax, essentially a guaranteed minimum income for people as a way of reducing and eliminating the bureaucracy of the welfare system and providing incentives for people to emerge from dependency and to be able to work without disincentives. So a number of controversial issues have not been adopted, but have been adopted, and others have been adopted around the world. He had an unwavering belief about the connection between personal and economic freedom, believing that you cannot have a society of personal freedom unless you also have a society of economic freedom. His ideas had a profound effect on me. More than any other economist, his ideas are pervasive in my own. My book here, that's actually published by Small Business Hawaii, is filled with ideas that I derive from Milton Friedman, and I owe him a great debt of gratitude. And I'm very pleased to say that he endorsed the book, and also that included the epilogue, which is the most important part, called The Philosophy of Liberty, which I'll show you an animated version of that shortly here.
Robin now has a film message for us and for all of you from the Rose and Milton Friedman Foundation. Robin?
I'm Robert Enlow, President and CEO of the Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice. You know, in 1955, Milton Friedman had a small idea that planted the seeds of a future revolution in American education.
What we need to do is to enable parents, by vouchers or other means, to have more say about the school which their child goes to, a public school or a private school, whichever meets the need of the child best. That will inevitably give them also more say about what their children are taught and how they are taught.
Like all young ideas, it needed nourishment and care to ensure that it would not wither and die, but flourish. In 2011, thanks to years of hard work and your support, this idea is now firmly rooted. Every day, more parents are joining the call for greater educational freedom. And every day, parents are demanding greater control over their children's education. They, like all of us, want an effective education that motivates and challenges their children. And they understand that school choice will help them achieve their dream of making sure their children, and all children, succeed in life and at work. And it isn't just parent support that's growing. Thanks to the efforts of the Friedman Foundation and school choice advocates like you, legislatures across the country are seriously debating the need for educational freedom. In fact, this year can be called the year of growth for school choice. From Maine to Alaska, Idaho to Texas, Oregon to Florida, school choice was the issue in state houses across the country. In all, 42 states have introduced school choice this year. As of July 2011, 11 states have enacted 17 school choice programs, of which 7 are brand new programs and 10 are expanded or improved programs. And we're not done yet. Iowa and North Carolina may still pass school choice this year. Not only has school choice expanded in the United States, it is also a step closer to universal school choice. Instead of solely providing choice to low-income families, states are extending more choice to middle-income families as well. These advances have brought us closer than ever before to the vision Milton Friedman planted decades ago, giving every family the power and freedom to choose their children's education. Today, you are celebrating Milton Friedman's 99th birthday, and in honor of his birth, let's reflect on the ways his vision has been advanced in the past year. In January, National School Choice Week brought together tens of thousands of school choice supporters at over 150 events, shining a spotlight on effective education options for every child. National School Choice Week generated news coverage reaching more than 34 million Americans. We saw parents rally at state capitals throughout the country to voice their demand for school choice. And this year, many state and local leaders responded in bold and meaningful ways to the demand for school choice. The school board in Douglas County, Colorado, voted to launch a voucher program allowing 500 students to attend private schools with public funds. Arizona created the first ever education savings accounts for children with special needs. Oklahoma created a tax credit program that will give private school scholarships to middle and low-income families across the state. Wisconsin dramatically expanded the nation's oldest urban voucher program so that now more than 65% of all families in Milwaukee will be able to get a grant to send their children to any participating private school in the state. And in Indiana, we celebrated the passage of the nation's most comprehensive set of systemic reforms, including the expansion of charter and virtual schools, a funding formula that ensured dollars followed children, and the nation's largest voucher program. These reforms are the result of the hard work of countless advocates across the country. But they are all branches that stem from the vision of a unique man with a unique mind.
A lot of people have influenced my political thinking over the years, and Dr. Friedman is probably close to the top of the list.
I think he really believed in the real American dream, and that is for all of us to have a say-so about what goes on in this country and to have some input. I think he would be so excited. I think he began to see his vision come true. You know, for the first time in American history, we are seeing parents have more of an involvement in how their children are educated.
Milton Friedman then, and I'm sure today, has a lot to tell us. He's a valuable American. He left a huge footprint. Milton Friedman was out there speaking to one of the most important issues of our century.
Friedman was as important in maintaining and defending human freedom as Ronald Reagan. Among the world of thinkers and writers and speakers, he was the ultimate defender of freedom. This was one of the most magnificent parts of Friedman's life, school choice.
Let the market work for a while, and you'll have a wholly different thing. It may be what you want is for children to get educated. And so I think you would see a really remarkable revolution if you could only let the market go to work.
If Milton Friedman were here today, I know that he would say, good job, but keep going. The progress is still too slow. That's because Milton Friedman understood that once universal choice was fully implemented in one state or another, it would sweep across the nation as parents realized firsthand that educational choice works. And our job going forward is to keep tending to Milton Friedman's idea, so that one day when we look back, we will see a thriving orchard of educational options for all parents. Thank you for joining us today in celebrating Milton Friedman's legacy. And thank you for all that you do to make sure that school choice grows bigger and bigger every year. Enjoy, and we'll see you next year on Milton's 100th birthday.
Now, if we could only have those winds of change sweep into Hawaii. And we're working on it. And now at this time, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce our very special keynote speaker, former Governor Linda Lingle.
Thank you very much, Sam. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.
It's really great to be here, and I appreciate Sam talking about seeing me around Hawaii Kai. And yeah, I'm under a lot less pressure, so I smile more. I don't wake up every day and hope there's not a tsunami somewhere in the world heading our direction. It's amazing when that's not your first thought of the day, how you really get off to a better start. So I'm very happy, though, to be here and to celebrate such an important event such as this. I want to thank the Grassroot Institute for the invitation. And I want to thank them for what they do, for the support they've given me through the years, and for those times they've held my feet to the fire. Because it's organizations such as this and the people who make up these organizations that are holding the federal government's feet to the fire. If not for people such as yourselves who believe in the issues, the freedom issues that Professor Schoolland spoke so eloquently about, if not for you, I can promise you, there would not be discussion now in Washington, D.C. about cutting government spending. The trajectory was clear. People who have been in Congress weren't standing up and saying, hey, let's stop this spending. That's not where it came from. It came from people just like you all across this country. And they are having an impact now in Washington, D.C. And I really do appreciate all of you. And as was said in the film and in Professor Schoolland's remarks, you have to speak up, even when it's not the majority opinion at that time. These are important issues, and our government indeed had to stop spending. Well, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what I've been doing the last 7 months or so, and then talk about school choice, my topic today. I've been traveling a fair bit. I made my first trip to Europe. I was the commencement speaker for the Department of Defense High School in Kaiserslautern, Germany. These are where the children of our military members who are stationed in that part of the world go to school every day. And it was such a privilege to be invited and to meet these young people who really have a tougher life than most young people going through that period of life, because not only are they uprooted from their friends, but they're serving in a strange, they're going to school in a strange country, and they are really some terrific young people who are flexible and adaptable and are comfortable in different parts of the world. And those are the kinds of skills that are going to help them later on in life. I've recently returned from a week in Washington, D.C., so I was up there at a time when these discussions were going on. I had meetings with 9 U.S. senators during my visit there, from Mitch McConnell to John McCain and Susan Collins to Kelly Ayotte from New Hampshire. And I got to talk with some of my former colleagues who were governors, who are now U.S. senators. They're both Democrats and Republicans, and there are 4 of them I've served with who are now in the United States Senate: Mark Warner and Joe Manchin on the Democrat side, and John Hoeven and Mike Johanns on the Republican side. And the governors, regardless of the parties, all agree that governors bring a particularly different approach in the United States Senate than those people who have come just from the legislative side. They are less ideological, they are more practical, they are more agenda-driven, they're able to put forth something they'd like to achieve and then move to do it, because as a governor, you have to. You can't hide behind a lot of other people. And so they are part of the bipartisan group up there. You may have seen Mark Warner this morning on TV. He's part of what they call the Gang of Six, trying to come to some resolution of the problems in Washington right now. And it really is a part of what I've been doing. I'm a founding member of the Governor's Council at the Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington, D.C. The BPC is a privately funded organization that invites former elected officials of both political parties to help to come up with ideas about how to solve problems that the nation's facing. And I think the most high-profile duo that we have right now out on the scene is Alice Rivlin, who was a Democrat budget director for the federal government, and Pete Domenici, who was a Republican United States Senator. You see them on TV. You also see Jay Howell, who's a former Assistant Secretary of Treasury. He was all over TV this morning. He's also with the BPC. Well, this year, for the first time, they created a Governor's Council. They invited 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans who had just left office. I was one of the 3 Republicans invited to help bring a vision from the states or from the people to the federal government, so that when these ideas are discussed, they're not just sitting among themselves in Washington coming up with ideas, but they're getting input from those of us who are out in the states. So the idea of bipartisanship is an important one, and indeed is the only way for our country to move forward. Here locally, I've been active with the Boy Scouts. I'm the chairman this year for School Night for Scouting. You're going to be hearing a lot about it. There'll be a big publicity campaign. Our goal is to sign up 2,500 new scouts this year. And we have a tremendous president. Rick Blangiardi is our board president. It's been a really great experience for me. So young people and their future is something that I'm not just interested in as a politician, but as a member of society through scouting and through robotics. And since Sam mentioned robotics, I wanted to share with you a story that happened last night. Representative Maramoto was there. There was a reception held for robotics by the Friends of Hawaii Robotics. And they had some of the young people involved in robotics stand up and talk about their involvement. And this little 12-year-old boy stood up, and he said, he was with his partner, who was also 12 or 13 years old, and he said, "I'd like to tell you about the project that we've been working on. It's a way to help people with diabetes more efficiently," and these are his words, I'm using his words, no kidding, "more efficiently deal with their disease by how the medicine is dispersed in their body." And our idea was to come up with a new needle. And so we got some, I forget what kind of gelatin he called it, some sort of ballistic gelatin. And we kept making our experiment with this needle so that the medicine would be more efficiently delivered and people wouldn't have to poke themselves so much, and they could control their blood sugar. And he went on like this for quite a few minutes. And the punchline was, they sent their invention to the Mayo Clinic to show them what they had done. And they were advised to go seek a patent. Have you guys heard this about these kids? And their patent is pending right now with the U.S. Patent Office. And again, and he shared, he said, you know, robotics helped me because I started to think about solving a problem. He said, it's not just building a robot, it's thinking about something that's hard and trying to come up with the answer to it. So it is important, this issue of school choice. as it relates to giving each student the best possible education and therefore the best possible life that they can have in our country. Well, I think the most glaring example of school choice that works is the American university and college system. Nobody tells us where we have to go to college. We don't have to go. If we live in the district where KCC is, we don't have to go there. We could live in Waianae and go to KCC if we feel like it. We could live in Manoa and go to UH Hilo if we want to, if it has the programs we're interested in, if it gives us a better value for our dollar. If we're parents and we're paying for our child's education and they want to go to Harvard or Stanford or Utah State or wherever they want to go, as a parent, you make that decision. You weigh the investment you're about to make, what your capabilities are, what each college or university has to offer, and you make a decision. And everybody, I think, would agree, America has developed over our history the world's leading college and university system. It's a place where people from all over the world want to come. We don't have people from all over the world wanting to come to our public school system here in Hawaii. We have many who want to go to HPA, they want to go to Punahou, they may want to go to Iolani. They're not rushing to come to the public school system in Hawaii. They could move here and move into a district and go there, but they don't. But when it comes to the university system, which is completely free choice, it has developed into the very best in the world, and one recognized as such, and I think it's a terrific example of choice. One of our ideas that we were not able to get support for as it relates to vouchers during my time in office, I think was a very important one for parents, for children, for society, and that was we wanted to have a voucher program to show what could happen just for students with special needs. This is a group of students, a subset of all the students in Hawaii. This is a group that the public school system really is not capable of educating to their full potential. They have proven that through the years. The state legislature had an investigation of them. The federal court told them they weren't doing a good job and forced them to do it. So it's not something the public schools want to do. It's not something they want to do today. So if we could give each parent of a special needs student the same amount of money we would spend for that student in the public school, which is a very large amount of money in some cases, let them take that money and go find a private placement for their child, you would see, in my opinion, you would see additional special needs schools sprout up, because now there's a market for it. Now people have this ability to take their child to that school. So I think as a, again, as a pilot, you take a group of students who just really are not the main focus of the public school system. That's not their mission. It's not what they really want to be doing. I think a system like that would be important to actually see in action. And again, it's from an area that we simply haven't done a good job at, and we've been trying for such a long period of time. And you know that the definition about keep trying to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result is just crazy to do that, especially when you're doing it with the future of children. So I think school choice and education is very, very important. In some ways, our effort to have local school boards was also connected to this choice issue. It brought education down to closer to where the parents were, so their impact could be more greatly felt. I can tell you as a person who lived on the neighbor islands for many years, I lived on Molokai for 10 years, I lived on Maui for 13 years. The neighbor island parents will never fully engage in education in the public school system until you have local school boards in their district, on their island. And I think that's true on this island as well. Whether it's Windward or Leeward or East Honolulu, having that local control by the people who live in the district and allowing parents to have a greater influence, I think is critically important and is tied to the choice issue. We also wanted to use the market a bit when I was governor to issue incentives to people who would teach in difficult subjects. The idea that we would pay the same amount of money to someone who taught, oh, let's just say English, or basic social studies, important subjects, ones that I took. I'm a liberal arts major, very, very important. But to knowing how many of those kinds of teachers there are versus how many math teachers are there, how many science teachers are there. We want to encourage more of this kind of teacher. Well, let the market work. Let's pay more for this kind of teacher. If we have schools in our state that are failing over and over again, the students aren't progressing, we want to pay teachers more who will go to that school out on the Leeward Coast, on the island of Molokai, as opposed to the system we have now, where teachers will only go there if they have to get enough seniority to transfer into town, to Maimai or other elementary schools in Neil Valley, wherever they want to end up, where it's simply easier to be a teacher at Neil Valley Middle School than it is at Nanakuli High School. It's just easier. By definition, everyone will tell you that. Every teacher. I don't think anyone can deny that fact because of the situation, because of economics, because of parental involvement, because of lots of reasons. But we want everybody to be the same, so we want to pay everybody the same, and the market needs to work if you want to encourage people to want to go to those districts, if we want to encourage them to teach the subjects we feel are most important for our young people. So again, I think that's letting the market work. We all know about the power of the HSTA and the singular focus they have on, to the greatest extent possible, maintaining the status quo. They don't support the kinds of things that I was just talking about. As Sam said, if he mentioned voucher, that was the end of the discussion. But I want you to know that's not true of the teachers, necessarily, who are the members of the union. I have tremendous support. Sam has tremendous support in the district of East Honolulu from the teachers. I can tell you, I'm out there, I'm talking with them. So it's not Representative Ward. All of the people here who've been in office, they've gotten support from the teachers, from the principals, perhaps not from the union. And I think you're starting to see now the teachers themselves saying, wait a minute, what is it we're paying for exactly? We don't even know what happened in this last negotiation. Our own union is not telling us. So I think a look at this issue of perhaps not forcing teachers to join a union is something you're going to hear more about, and I think it's going to come from the teachers themselves. And I think it makes a lot of sense that it should. I want to just throw out one number. I don't want to use many statistics today, but this is a critical one. The number of students in the public schools in our state has averaged, over the last 40 years, between 175 and 185,000 students per year that we educate. The budget has grown, and this is in current dollars, from $850 million to over $2 billion in that same period of time. We don't have more students. Holding dollars constant, have we improved from 850 million to 2 billion? Are we more than twice as good as we were? We're not. So again, it should focus our attention that there needs to be some change because we're doing the same thing, the results aren't getting better, and we're actually spending a lot more money. I think it's important to stay focused on education, so I'm glad the Grassroot Institute is focused on this subject. As we talked a minute ago, the unions have tremendous power, and the fact that the members of the teaching corps have to pay to the union has enabled the union then to take that money and to invest it in contributions to politicians to keep the system the way it is virtually. And so to break that link, if the union didn't have all that money that they could then go use to influence legislators, I think we'd see much more of the change that we're talking about and that you heard Milton Friedman talking about. But because the unions were so strong when I was governor, it was a challenge to get the kind of change that local school boards would bring about, positive change, not change for the sake of change, but change because we believed it was going to produce better results. So because of the union power, we focused on areas where we could have a difference, make a difference, such as early childhood education, with quality curriculum standards, teacher training, and more slots for low-income parents. We focused on the university system, the UH West Oahu campus, UH Hilo, more than just the flagship at Manoa. And we pushed hard for charter schools and fair funding for them and to allow innovation. And in fact, charter schools are the only segment of the public school system that's growing from 4,500 students to 9,500 students in the past 8 years. There are now 31 charter schools, public charter schools. But yesterday when I went to that robotics reception, I threw out a fact to the people there to emphasize how critically important it is that STEM education not be something extra in school, but that it be a focal point in school. And here was the fact I shared yesterday. The average 10-year-old today has more computing power on their desk at home than the Pentagon could afford 40 years ago. Think about that. Hank Rogers was in the audience, great tech entrepreneur. He shook his head, absolutely, that's a fact. A 10-year-old has more computing power on their desk at home than the Pentagon could afford 40 years ago. What does that say to us who came after this tech revolution occurred? So we better get focused, because China's getting focused, and India's getting focused, and other countries are getting focused. And our young people will not just compete anymore with people from Hawaii or America, they'll compete with people from all over the world. So STEM education needs to be more fully integrated. And what you're seeing, and I want to link this STEM and the choice issue together here, what you're seeing is those schools that are close in proximity to good private schools here in Hawaii, or the community is, the parents drive by one of the private schools on the way to work and they can afford it. You know what's happened to the public schools? They know they better have a robotics program at the public school. They know they better have the International Baccalaureate program at the public school, because those parents do have choice. They don't have to stay at that school, and you're seeing as the Department of Education has to start to downsize as these enrollments drop in certain areas, certain schools are fighting for their existence. And part of their fight is to attract more people from the community. And how do they do that? By offering what people want. Because people, in fact, with money do have a choice. They don't have to stay in a public school. But if you will give parents what their children need in their own neighborhood, especially in these tough economic times, you're going to be able to hold more of those students. So I see school choice playing out in competition, playing out right now here with our own public schools. We started robotics in a focused way in 2007. There were 95 robotics teams of various kinds in the state. Today there are 425. 60% of all public schools are involved with one of the 6 robotics programs. And as was mentioned by Sam, it's not about raising a generation of kids who are going to go out and build robots for a living. It's about putting kids into an environment where they can solve a difficult problem, not be stymied by it, have perseverance as they seek a solution, work cooperatively with their team members, understand that you've got to raise the money to build that robot and then ship it to the competition in Atlanta. The government's not going to give you the money. You've got to go out and raise the money. And by the way, I would say by everyone's measure today, the #1 robotics program in the state of Hawaii. #1. You all know what the #1 school is? Waialua High School. It's not Punahou. It's not Kalani in the public system. It's Waialua High School out in the country. They are internationally recognized team. They're known on the mainland and throughout the world as the Hawaii Kids. When you mention Hawaii Kids in the world of robotics, everybody knows them. And they know their teacher, Glenn Lee, because the entire community has adopted these young kids. So don't let anyone ever tell you our kids simply don't measure up or can't, or because their parents aren't well-to-do, or because they don't come from a town school. Our kids can compete anywhere. And Waialua is proof of it. And STEM is such an important part of these young people's future. You know, some people like to find ways for politicians to disagree with each other, and it happens all the time, and it's happened to me often. But I think it's important, regardless of party, and as you know, I'm, as I said, affiliated with the Bipartisan Policy Center, which means it's not whose idea it is, but is it a good idea? So for me, although I know you see in Washington now this terrible bickering that's going on, you might be surprised to know that President Obama and I share a lot of the same views in the area of education. He's a big supporter of the charter school movement. He's for merit pay for teachers. He's for closing failing schools. And I think it's important, whether it's those areas I mentioned or the idea of raising graduation requirements, when there are good ideas, politicians have to be the first to step up and say, well, I'm going to work against that person in the election because I'm going to run as a Republican, but these are good ideas. These are in the interest of our community, our people, and our kids. And we all need to be able to do that, even if ideologically our general outlook is a certain way. Be intellectually honest when someone comes up with a good idea. Even if it came from a labor union and the Grassroots Institute, you know, maybe generally sees things differently than a labor union, but if they came up with an idea that was good for us, be willing to recognize that. Hopefully the people in Washington are going to be able to do that in the next few hours. Well, I have a couple of concerns about the future. One is the ability of our Department of Education to deliver on the Race to the Top grant that they received from the federal government. We got $75 million. Linda Smith, who is here and well known to all of you, she was my senior policy advisor after Randy Roth. She was with me at least, I think, 6 years. She really was a driving force, along with Mark Anderson on our staff, to get these Race to the Top funds. They worked cooperatively with the Department of Education, even though we don't agree on everything with them. When these funds became available and we saw it as a way to bring about reform, we were a part of applying for it and really drove that process, and I think the Department of Education would tell you that. But we made promises to get that money. We made big promises. And with the stalemate right now between the government, the governor, the Department of Education, and the HSTA, I'm very concerned about us being able to deliver on those promises for the children and to get that funding. So that's something to keep focused on. I'm also concerned about the national administration's ability to withstand the pressure from the teachers' unions at the national level in an election year. I hope the president will be able to. He should stand his ground. He has what I consider in almost every way a very sound education policy. It's one that's future focused. It's focused on the children, but I know he will be under a lot of pressure in this election year. For me, some of the considerations I would get focused on is, I talked about STEM, but that also includes technical education. So I think more focus on the technical vocational side of education is very important, because all kids are different and they need a variety of choices themselves. I think renewing focus on foreign language capabilities. Some of you have been around a long time to remember there was a task force here in Hawaii in the 90s, late 90 period, and one of their recommendations, I think it was not a revitalization task force or something like that. And one of their key recommendations was this focus on foreign languages. I think it was important then, I think it's much more important now, especially particular languages like Chinese, like Arabic, like Spanish, perhaps not traditional languages for people to take. I think making sure that we offer those languages would be very important. And then, as I said earlier, is to take another look at this idea of mandatory teacher union membership. Let teachers make that decision for themselves. We're talking about choice for children. Let's have choice for teachers as well. I'm certain that Dr. Friedman would support that. And then finally, I would hope that as a nation, as a state, we could start to establish some aspirational goals for the young people, like our country did when Sputnik was put into orbit by the old Soviet Union. Get the country focused on something that kids can strive and to be a part of. And when I listened to that young man yesterday talk to me about his invention to help people, I was just touched by it, because the disease issues that we face that we still can't resolve, the cancer issue, Alzheimer's disease, just very tough diseases on families and on society. You know, turning the kids loose on these kinds of issues, the renewable energy issue, the clean water for the world issue, getting them focused on things. I tell you, the young people, they're so idealistic. So giving something to aspire to, I think, would be very important for the future. Well, I'm excited about the future. I'm an optimist by nature. I mean, being a Republican in Hawaii, you have to be an optimist. You just do, you know, by nature. If you weren't, you wouldn't try. So I am optimistic. I'm looking forward to always working hard for the community in whatever capacity, and I thank you again for this great forum and the opportunity to talk with people who are focused on freedom, individual freedom, and in this case, school choice. Mahalo.